Paul here from TFL Car, and I'm coming to you from beautiful Sonoma Raceway in Sonoma, California, where we're getting to play all day today with the Hyundai N cars, and it's going to be a good time. We've got the Kona M and the Elantra M coming at you from TFL Car. And under the hood, we've got a 2-liter engine. Now, what's interesting is this engine, this GDI engine, which is gasoline direct injection, if you ever wondered what that stood for, is in all of the Hyundai N's. And basically, it's a 2-liter turbo and 276 horsepower, 289 pound-feet of torque, available with a 6-speed manual in the Elantra and also a dual clutch in the Elantra, and only the dual clutch in the Kona. And if you do opt for that dual clutch transmission, there's an overboost function where you get another 10 horsepower out of the engine for 20 seconds. Then it needs 40 seconds to recover, and you can do it all over again.
We love a sunny day on the mountain, especially with some fresh snow, but both the sun and the cold will dry out your skin on a daily basis. Caldera Labs tackles the problem with high-performance skincare products that use nature's purest ingredients, pharmaceutical-grade science, and sustainable business practices. Caldera Labs has a 3-part skincare regimen to improve aging, tired-looking skin. In the morning, you use the Clean Slate Cleanser, followed by the base layer. At night, reapply the Clean Slate and follow it with the Good Serum. The regimen is simple and clinically proven to make your skin look and feel better. Try it for 60 days. If you're not a fan, you get a 100% refund, no questions asked. To start your journey to healthier skin, visit calderalab.com and use the code TFLCAR for 30% off. So click the link below or go to calderalab.com/TFLCAR. That's their biggest discount of the year and the same as Black Friday.
Now, this vehicle, because it's an N, has had a lot of updates to it. And for example, these little braces here, there's also special bushings. They're throughout the car. There's actually 7 major changes to the actual body structure, including a brace through the back, and it has a fold-down seat. So, you know, you're going to have to kind of weave your parcels through that opening now that now has braces going across it. So these are true performance vehicles, and I got to, thank Roman and the TFL crew. I might sound a little bit like a broken record. I don't do a lot of these reviews for you guys, and when I do, I'm talking about kind of the same stuff. And the reason is they send me to do these kind of ultra performance cars, which is, well, if you know me at all, is my favorite thing in the world. So yeah, maybe I do sound a little like a broken record, but these guys are serious about their performance of these vehicles. So this isn't, an appearance package. This is actual changes to the structure of the car to make the chassis stiffer so it doesn't twist as much under the cornering loads that these Michelin Pilot 4S's can provide. So, the full gamut of improvements have been made, starting again with the body in white, with extra spot welds, with braces, and making everything stiffer. Then you go into the suspension, the wheels and tires, and of course we've got all sorts of things going on there. The most obvious, of course, is as I mentioned, Michelin Pilot 4S's. We also have much larger brakes, 14.2 inches in diameter on the car. Then the shock absorbers are continuously adjustable. And there, of course, there are the different modes you can use, where you've got your N mode, but it's also completely customizable as well, where you're changing all the settings for the steering, for the shocks, for the powertrain. All those things can be adjusted, and they make very big differences in the way the car drives. As a matter of fact, if you engage that N mode and you start ticking things up to sort of the track side of things, this thing's really, really stiff to drive. We've had a couple drives with it on the street, and oh my goodness, like it's a proper track mode where you would really only engage this on a very, very twisty mountain road or on a racetrack. But then you hit that button and you take it back to the normal mode, and the car is actually quite nice to drive, very livable, a great daily driver. And I might mention, I mentioned the powertrain, but one thing we should mention is the exhaust. Because when you go into that N mode, I hope you like Snap, Crackle, and Pop. And I'm not talking about the cereal, because it really does all the burbles and bangs, and it does a lot of them, and they're pretty loud. And it's kind of funny. I guess on the one hand, you might feel like it's a little bit obnoxious, but I have to say it's definitely kind of cool. And obviously, like, even the premium brands, Audi and all those guys, are doing the very same thing. So a true performance vehicle with real performance bones to it, where we've got a very strong engine, Cool transmission options, of course. Remember, we can still get a 6-speed manual with this thing, and it shifts really well. It's really nice to drive. And then you've got the DCT 8-speed, dual clutch gearbox, which again is not a normal thing. And the one thing I should add to all of this that I haven't talked about yet, that we haven't talked about yet, and it's a bit of the elephant in the room, is that this thing is front-wheel drive. As a matter of fact, they all are. Even the Kona, that is typically a crossover, maybe a slightly lower SUV, however you want to categorize it yourself, they're all front-wheel drive. And so there's a lot of management going on there as far as torque steer. And hey, here's a first. They got up in the presentation this morning and they said, torque steer is not a negative, it's a feature. And I kind of chuckled a little bit, as you probably are as well. But they talked about something actually very sincerely. It's like if you manage it and you do that with bushings and stiffness and the half shaft lengths of the axles, that actually can provide some feel to what's going on. So it makes it a little bit easier to feel when you're rolling into too much throttle coming out of the corner. So it can give you a warning that the car is about to understeer, for example. So the torque steer is not like jerk the wheel out of your hands 1985 Omni GLH turbo torque steer. I know that because I had one. It's more refined than that. It's more like you would see in the Civic Type R or a vehicle like that. And they actually are tuning the torque steer. You're never going to get rid of it because it's front wheel drive, but by tuning it, you can actually, again, let it add the feel to that steering that maybe these electric power steering systems don't necessarily have anymore. So that's kind of cool too. So a front wheel drive car, lots and lots of real modifications, serious horsepower credentials, 2 different transmission options, a very livable package, big screens inside, lots of configuration things going on there. Pretty fun car. So when you're looking at the styling, the one thing to point out is, again, this is a pretty functional vehicle. Just as we're talking about with the chassis improvements, everything is here for a reason. Now there's a certain amount of course, license to the artists that style these cars, but all these little bits and bobs and things are helping with the aerodynamics of the car and the cooling of the components within the car. And proof to the pudding, like these guys are on a roll winning championships in touring car racing. As a matter of fact, they just won the championship this year again. And what are they racing against? They're racing against Audis. They're racing against Type R Hondas. They're racing against cars in the front wheel drive touring car category, and they're kind of dominating, and they have been for a few years now. So again, you think of Hyundai being this new brand, or N is this like a real deal? Also, remember, the head of N is the guy that used to build M3s for BMW. He was in charge of the M department, and he came over, and I had this sneaking feeling, they said, what's next? And he said, well, M, and then it's N, and that's how we ended up with N on the Hyundais. It makes sense, right? It's alphabetical. And you see all the styling cues. We've got the red N stripe all the way around the car. And eat your heart out, if you have your splitter protectors on your Chrysler car. This is actually supposed to stay on the car and isn't something just for shipping purposes, but all very distinctive. They've got side splitters, a very cool little feature, I think, or in here where we have the belt line of the car. And look at this line here. This is pretty distinctive, where we've got an actual kind of triangular shaped line here. So we end up with kind of cool styling cues. And in the back, they've got an actual wing on the car instead of just a lip spoiler. For the money these cars come in at, there's a lot of cool stuff going on with these vehicles. So you're not just grabbing this vehicle with a styling kit on it and hoping it's fast. This actually has race championships underneath it and real performance bones. And they were pointing out, obviously, that the engine that's in this is exactly the same engine that's in the race car. The whole front suspension setup and how it works with McPherson struts in the front, the multi-link in the rear, all of that is used in the race car that's out there beating these premium brands, head to head in the same championship. So looking at the back of the car, we got a little diffuser, the little sort of signature triangular reflector or third brake light that they have on the N cars. Nice little diffuser underneath there. It actually goes for quite a ways. It's not just this little short thing where you can see it, but they're trying to do something with this diffuser the whole way through the car. And also the exhaust here, aftermarket be damned. We've got the big melon shooter right on the back of the car, and it's got 2 of them. And you just imagine all the burbles and pops that come out of both sides of the exhaust. So the interior of the car it's kind of a mix. It's incredibly adjustable, from tilt telescope wheel to the seats, all that kind of normal stuff. But even the electronics, these big 10.25 inch screens, which there are 2 of them, by the way, everything is really customizable. And then we've got really nice stuff, like we've got some, micro suede here. So we've got, Alcantara on the interior. We've got nice leather steering wheel with nice thumb cutouts and all the controls on the wheel, all fantastic. There's your N buttons. There's your 20-second overboost that you can do with the car. A mechanical handbrake. Yay! How cool is that? Handy in a front-wheel drive car, I might add. But then the price point kind of, does jump out at you a little bit, where you look at the, the materials that we have here, and so there is a fair amount of kind of hard plastics around. I don't know whether it's something to be hugely disappointed in. Really, it should be expected when we're talking about vehicles here that are much less money than the vehicles, for example, they're competing with on the racetrack and beating. So it's got to come from somewhere. And to me, again, the priority being we have a great infotainment system. All of that stuff is lovely. We have a great driving experience in the car that's highly customizable as well, and kind of let down a little bit in materials, right? Reminding you that this is not a true premium brand. And I think that's just okay. And then I can go hit an N button. You get that really cool like fire going around the tachometer thing, and all sorts of cool stuff on the display. So you can go over here and have, oh, look at that, there's my brake pressure. Look, I'm pressing up and down on the brake. And this is, again, all customizable, whatever you want to have. Lap timer, we've got RPMs here. We can have a track layout, throttle position, which is kind of neat. So there's throttle position, and you can see the RPMs jumping. And then engine oil and engine actual coolant temperature. And one point to make about this is they said this car is designed to do continuous lapping around the racetrack. By the way, not just the Elantra, also the Kona. And that, you're like, what? Yeah, their crossover is designed to do continuous track lapping. So maybe you can sneak that one by the wife where you couldn't sneak this one by. Just a thought. When you open the trunk, it's actually a fairly wide trunk, but you'll notice that bright red brace in the back. And yeah, this thing does fold down. And if you fold it down, this whole seat folds down, that brace stays right there. That's the price of performance. But hey, it makes the car handle better, a lot better. So if you're looking at an N car, that's a compromise you're willing to make. All right, so you could get this out of here. If you needed it in a pinch, there's 4 bolts. You're gonna need a gear wrench. It looks like about a 12 millimeter. And to grab the bolts, there's one here, and one on each side. But this shows you kind of, again, their seriousness about their performance, that they're willing to throw that in the back of a car that still has fold-down seats. So here we are at one of my favorite racetracks in the world, and behind me, yeah, it's an SUV, a crossover. It's not something that you're supposed to run around a sinuous 2.5 mile, incredibly fun, flowing, fast racetrack, but here's where we are, and this is what we're doing. And I have to say, after driving this thing, it's shockingly competent. Not only is it an SUV type vehicle, which they didn't lower, by the way, when they made the Kona into an N. They didn't lower the vehicle, they kept the stock ride height, but they changed a whole bunch of other stuff. And of course, we've got upgraded brakes, upgraded wheels, upgraded tires. All of those things have been improved. And the net out of this is this thing can go around the track for multiple lap after lap after lap. You could do a 20-30 minute session, and you could keep up with and pass a lot of cars along the way. And I'm almost like not believing it as I'm saying it, but that's literally what I've just done in this vehicle. It's amazingly quick and competent. Now, would I rather have an Elantra? Yeah, it's got a lower center of gravity, especially with a manual gearbox, which you can get in the Elantra N that you can't get here, where you end up with a DCT as the standard and only transmission available. The Elantra is a little bit more nimble, it has a lower center of gravity, but all of that adds up to maybe about a half a second in lap time difference if you were to try and nail it down objectively. It's amazing the Kona can do what it can do. I was keeping up with the cars, no problem at all, and we were going full pace. Had the guy that was in front of me just won the touring car championship for Hyundai last weekend, and we were going for it. He got out of the car, it was high fives and fist bumps, and he goes, that was just like a race. And I'm like, it was. So Hyundai N division, it's no joke. under the very warm, we could get some eggs on here and some marshmallows and have some s'mores and make some breakfast. But the same 2-liter GDI engine, 276 horsepower, 289 pound-feet of torque, plus that nice little button where you get an overboost function, because this comes with the DCT transmission standard, which is an 8-speed, by the way. So yeah, got all the good stuff, all the chassis bracing, but in a small, compact SUV package. And the idea behind this car is it's more utilitarian. It doesn't have that brace in the back that gets rid of your cargo room in the Elantra N, for example. So this one's much more usable. But the net is, around the autocross track, 0.2 of a second slower. That's it, 0.2. And it's on a Pirelli tire, not the Michelin, and that's probably just about the 0.2, especially if you were doing consecutive laps. The Pirelli tends to get a little hot fast, but a really impressive vehicle. And again, when you think about how this could be a very, very good daily driver for you and your young family, yet it has the performance potential of something that can be taken around the track and had a lot of fun with. It does have a little bit more of a comfortable seat, so it's not like the seats in the Elantra or the Veloster N. But other than that, this vehicle, again, just a purebred performance vehicle that can be used on a daily basis. We've got a split 60-40 split seat, which is pretty typical. And again, a fairly small vehicle, so we don't have this massive area. If you have a Newfoundland, you might want to go something slightly bigger, perhaps. But if your dog is more like a Chihuahua or something, this would be great. We also, the dreaded tire mobility kit, so that lets you know that there is not a spare tire hiding underneath here, though it looks like there is room. Exterior-wise, of course, starts with the N logo and their unique grills to their N vehicles. This reminds me a little bit of what you might see on a, so you guys are going to hate me for this, but maybe a Porsche GT2 or 3, but just a styling cue, not a functional vent there. Side sills, N badges, body cladding that's the same color as the paint. It gives it that sportier look as opposed to like an off-road look. And of course, you still have the dual exhaust and a diffuser down there as well, and a nice roof spoiler to cap it all off. Tilt and telescope on the wheel, which is great in all of the vehicles, so you can really find a good seating position. Same N buttons that we'd see on the Elantra, and we've also got that overboost right there. The N grin shift mode, and the conditions are not met, so the car would have to be in gear, seatbelt buckled, and away we go. And of course, you can press all the buttons here. You can get yourself into all these really cool N modes and have all the same sort of track features as well show up on the car. Lap timer, oil temp, that's all the same. All right, here we are at Sonoma Raceway. We're just rolling past the buildings that I literally helped build as part of the team that put the Jim Russell Racing Driver School here. So this track is my home track, even though I live in Colorado. And it's a great track, and to have a car that you can drive on it that has this sort of performance is just fantastic. And I hadn't driven a Hyundai N before today, I'll admit it, and I've been really, really surprised with the confidence of these vehicles, and that I'm talking about the track capabilities, and also they're very good on the road, because these cars also have all sorts of different drive modes that affect, as they do these days, right? They have all these drive modes that can take them, especially when you start talking about suspension and engine performance and noise level of the exhaust and all of that. When you can start dialing that stuff, you know, from one extreme to the other, you can create a car that, you know, easily passes the mother-in-law test, but also, you know, just by pushing a couple buttons on the steering wheel and setting some customized settings, you've got something that is not only capable of doing a lap around a racetrack, but capable of doing repeated laps around a racetrack. And that's just sort of fantastic. So it doesn't matter whether you choose the Elantra, the Veloster, and you also have the Kona, all in the N brand, all using the same 276 horsepower GDI engine, all using these very adjustable shock absorbers that can take the car from one extreme to the other in a very confident, affordable track package. And frankly, it doesn't get any better than that. Just a nice little bit of oversteer at 95 miles an hour. Really nice brakes. Manual transmission or 8-speed DCT is an option. And these things just rip. the thing to remember about these guys is remember that if you're having a hard time believing Hyundai can build vehicles of this quality, just remember there's a lot of German accents in the Hyundai engineering and product planning group these days. And you've got quite literally the father of the M cars from a couple generations ago at the top of the chain here with sort of an open checkbook to make these cars as good as they can be. And it shows, it really does. The only downside to me, you know, I live in Colorado, and the only downside is that these are front-wheel drive cars. They're as good as front-wheel drive cars get, but for the type of driving in the wintertime that I deal with, going to the ski areas and things like that, just getting up the driveway to my house in the mountains, you know, that's a big problem. If you don't live with that sort of issue, then absolutely consider these cars, because they're every bit the performance vehicles that you can get at this price point and then some. I'll be honest with you, that's about the speed I used to go through here in an Audi R8 back in Audi sports car experience days, and I'm doing it in a 4-door Elantra. So nice job, N Group, nice job. So amazing day at one of my favorite racetracks in the world, Sears Point in Sonoma, California. And I'll admit that I came out here going, oh, I'm going to drive a sedan and an SUV around the track, and I wasn't super excited. And I have to say, standing here after doing it all, it's been an absolute blast to drive these cars. They're so much more. And I will say, I've never driven a Hyundai N before. And now I've driven a Veloster, I've also driven the Kona, and I've also driven the Elantra. And these vehicles are legitimately good track vehicles with serious engineering and a depth of development that maybe you wouldn't expect at their price point. Now that brings me to a point, we don't know exactly what they're going to cost yet. We know the Veloster's around $32,500, so it's undercutting the Civic R by a pretty good margin. And we can expect sort of the same thing with these vehicles here. At least that's what they're hinting at. So I think bang for buck, these are going to be really impressive vehicles. And if you're looking for something that is track-worthy yet utilitarian every day, I think you'd better take a very strong look at any of the Hyundai N brand.